Kia ora te whānau. This is my fifth of these videos about the gold rush. So, a couple of things. I've had a few people ask, can I get copies of the slides? No. If you want the information that I've based all the lectures on, it's free. It's available. I spent 3 years and 3 months with earthquakes in the middle writing this. This is my thesis. You can look it up. It's free to download. It's called Rich in Myth, Gold and Narrative, and it's on the University of Canterbury website. All you do is Google Lloyd Carpenter. Basically, Rich in Myth will do it. You can download it as a PDF. You get everything I'm saying with a lot more details and even some illustrations by going there. Okay. Second thing that is available as a resource, and I strongly recommend this because it's got my name on the front, is Rushing for Gold. So I'll hold it up there. Rushing for Gold, Life and Commerce on the Goldfields of New Zealand and Australia, edited by me and Lyndon Fraser. Now in there, there's 20 chapters, including 3 on the Chinese, 1 on Māori gold miners, and the next talk I do will be on Māori gold miners. There's information about the links between Australia and New Zealand and women. There's 2 very good chapters on women innkeepers, and also the so-called dodgy women or fallen women on the rush area in Otago. So strongly recommend that book. It took about 5 years to put the thing together. So those 2 are available to you. The slides are not. Okay. So today I just want to look at wiping out a couple of myths. Actually, mostly that's what I do about this, is take the gold rush and say, nah, it didn't happen. So the popular myth of the gold rush to Otago takes sort of ideas that first came out of California, then came, that has gone fuzzy already. Can't believe it. Let's try and unfuzz that. No, we made it worse. Lloyd, you're not doing any better. There we go. Conflates. So what it does is it takes this is S.T. Gill, who was actually on the Bendigo and Ballarat goldfields. So he sketched what he saw. And this is, he says, a Bendigo mill. Basically, it's a fight. Here we've got the Rough and Readies in the American stream in California, and then John Turnbull Thompson's painting, because again he was there, of miners heading for Gabriel's Gully when there wasn't even a road there. And sort of people have created this idea of corrupt police, bewildered Chinese miners and wealthy shopkeepers. Actually, I'll deal with that one in another talk. But everyone from Coots Lager to Speights have basically used this hard men in a hard landscape. I mean, here you've got someone that looks like he's a miner and he's carrying supplies, and the first thing has got beans, and every other package is a box of Speights. Doesn't show up that clearly on there. How to be a southern man. This was a campaign in the late 90s, early 2000s, where basically Speights, you were living. They never quite called it the gold rush, but it was pretty obvious that it was the same sort of idea there. Tourism marketers come up with sort of this rambunctious past to sort of create. I mean, this is a bridge that was only built for one thing. That was gold rush transport. It's actually one of the older bridges in New Zealand. Now you throw yourself off with a piece of rubber attached to your ankles, and you can sip a latte at a genuine shifted stone by stone from the floodwaters. Cafe based, that was built in the Goldfields era. But if we look closer, all the work that they have predicated these sort of promotions on actually weren't real. And much of what people describe as the gold rush was the first maybe 3 months of the Otago rush and nothing more. So I want to look at a demythologised gold rush to Central Otago. And see, one of the problems you got is people didn't record daily life. What some people did is when they were in their 80s, wrote reminiscences of them in their 20s, but get your head around that. 60 years later. Now, if you asked me to write about Marlborough in 1977, that I was 13 years old, I was starting school at Marlborough Boys College, and I can vaguely remember a couple of things. But if you think about it, when you look back, you only remember the exceptional. At school you might remember getting the cane, or you might remember getting picked for the first 11, but really pretty much it's a blur. And it's the same when people were sort of remembering the gold rush. They didn't record the daily grind. They would say, oh well, Gabriel Reid, he found Gabriel's Gully in the Tuapeka. I met him. Yeah, but what do you do during the day? Yeah, but I also met, you know what I mean? So they sort of, they remember the significant things, not how they made bread, how they stopped, if they were a shopkeeper, how they stopped the butter from turning liquid in the Otago sun. They might have turned up to a concert. They might remember that. I mean, when I was 21, I went and saw Cliff Richard. It's a bit tragic, I know, but it was actually a good concert. I remember it quite well. Why? It was the only concert I went to that year. So, I mean, you might remember it. If you were at the Gold Rush, you might remember going to see Charles Inimitable Thatcher. That's worth looking up if you're studying the Gold Rush. But, or a famous murder. How did you get on? How did you wash the dishes? How did you take a plate that was covered in grease from the bacon and eggs you cooked for breakfast and clean that? Well, I don't know. No one recorded it. The emphasis on the remarkable sort of ignores the fact that most of their memory is of long days of hard work. In one of my other talks, I talked about these fellas. You know this. They are drilling into quartz. How do you do that? You have a drill is a long drill, about yay long. Oh, yeah, about that long. And it has a cross piece at the end. And that's it. It's a tempered steel. And what you do is you hold on to it against the face, and your mate swings a 9-pound hammer. Well, that's what, 4.5 kilos. Hammer with all his might to smack the end of it. You then turn it quarter of a turn, and he hits it again. And quarter of a turn. 10 hours per day for 5.5 days a week. And the reason you did 10 hours is because then rather than 9 is because you wanted Saturday afternoon off. And no one, Sunday afternoon was always off. Or working in the freezing, because I'll tell you now, even in summer, that water's cold, really cold. You're working there for all hours. I mean, sometimes if it was sunny, you were working. And so, who are you going to tell? Oh, what did you do in the gold rush? Had a hammer, 10 hours a day, for 30 years. Who's going to want to hear that? So, the problem with that also is you look at the stories of the women. This is Mrs. Elizabeth Reed, an amazing woman, absolutely amazing woman. She's talked about in that Rushing for Gold book I was telling you about. No one talks about the fact if you do everything in freezing cold water, because they had the water races. So if you look at the video called the Water Powered Gold Rush, the water races provided the water that you used for washing, for toileting, for cooking, everything. And but if you're always doing everything in cold water, your hands crack and they chafe and they develop chilblains. It's not nice. They had to cook food by, if you wanted water, you had to go to the water race, get the water, because there were very few houses actually built beside the river, for one major reason, that in Otago the rivers had a nasty habit of rising really quickly and drowning people who were living beside them. You'll only do that once. And the sheer hard work of producing kids safely. I mean, puerperal disease and all sorts of issues with birth was prevalent right throughout. And you had some people, like Elizabeth Reed was the midwife at Bendigo, and by all accounts she was very skilled. I've been quite surprised at how few women died in childbirth in the Cromwell area, and I think it's largely because of that lady there. And as such, I think she needs a greater notoriety. Well, no, not notoriety. A greater share of the fame. That's where she lived. This is the old Solway Hotel. It was made of corrugated iron, 10 rooms, and she lived in there. That's a photo that dates from the 1960s, so it's not that long ago that she was at that point. I think it was about 1905 or so, and she was still running a hotel down at Rocky Point, where there's a pottery now. The problem that I've had is that what I want to do is I sort of look at these guys and think I'd really like to tell what they did, what the ordinary guy was. I mean, not the superstars. I mean, this fella here, Fred Evans, you'll actually track him down in a few different things. If you read my thesis, McKizzledick, Bospednick, Edwards has quite an interesting story. Just have a look at that. It's in the chapter about the quartz adventures in the Rise and Shine Valley. In fact, that's another talk I'm going to put together for this series. One of the problems is what remains, and I've said there that you look at the remains, and if you have a look at the video all about the cottages, I detail it there, where you look and think, oh, what tough, uncomfortable lives, whereas the reality is, this is a restored cottage in Inniscourt Road Street in Cromwell that they let me come in and have a look. It's actually been finished exactly like it would have been done with slate lime and all sorts. They were really cottage. They were really comfortable places to live. You could keep them warm with a small fire, basically smouldering in the grate. And as they didn't have many windows, so these I've mentioned in another one of the videos. The multiple paned windows were done for one thing, and that's so you could transport them safely where there was very little roads. But generally speaking, you always look quite carefully at these. You'll find that probably that's the original window, and this one here has been put in at a later date, because windows and doors are where the drafts escaped. But anyway, they were not uncomfortable. you know, the detritus, there were two things that were valuable. One was anything wood, and two was any corrugated iron. So if they were taking anything apart, and this is the cottage that's in the one I talked about, the strike. If you're taking anything away, the stone is what remains. That's the kind of the leftover. So all this changed when in late 2010 I got a email from Hilary Rowlands, a teacher in England, an amazing lady. She was seeking information about her great-grandfather Charles Lawson, who was a Norwegian-born Carl Lawson. And she enclosed a letter written from Bendigo. His daughter Kate and son Julius were living with his sister and husband in Liverpool. Although I understand Kate might have been in Ireland. I'm quite certain on that. The letter, it's the only letter we have from Bendigo at the time, and it's quite a beautiful letter. It's the sort of thing a dad writes to his daughter, to his kids. It sort of writes about his simple faith, his daily life and work, and there's this constant theme of how much he misses his family and especially his kids. But it's more than that. It's a first-person insight into an ordered, civilised, and even, dare I say it, mundane goldfields life. See, so Hilary knew that her ancestor had been killed at Bendigo, nothing else, so she asked me to help her. So Lawson left Norway in the 1860s and he moved to Liverpool. Liverpool was the centre of maritime industry in the 1850s, 1860s. It was benefiting from the huge amount of trade from India and also the trade. Liverpool was on the correct side to trade with America. Also trade with Ireland. And so it was, if you were a seaman, which Carl Lawson was, it's the place you go to if you are looking for a sailing ticket. So he goes there and he struggled because just as he arrived there was an economic slump. Sometimes you'll see this referred to as the long recession or the long depression and various other titles. But basically he was there and there was a guy by the name of Frederick Ablestead who was from the same village as Lawson, the village of it's got straight out of my head, it'll come back to me. Wrote to him and basically said, come to Bendigo. There's consistent work available in the Cromwell Company mine. And so he farmed his children out. Basically, he sent his kids with a gold sovereign in their hands to these relatives, and they turned up with the money in their hand and knocked on the door and were taken in. The letter is dated December 1882, Bendigo. Dearest Kate and Julius, I am working in the gold mine and have been here 4 months. I like it very much and am enjoying excellent health. We're about 40 men working in the mine, one half night, one day, for it's just the same down the ladder night and day. Have you thought about that? When you're underground, it's dark. Really, really, really dark. So he makes the point, it doesn't matter whether you're working nights or days. In the mine, it's night. Our pay is 10 shillings per day, £12 per month, paid monthly. I commence work at 7:30 in the morning and knock off 5:30 in the evening. So, This indicates three things. One, the workforce had stabilised at around 40. Sometimes it went as high as 80 or as low as 30. And the second thing, the gains fought for in the bitter Bendigo strike of 1881 had been preserved. So I put a video up there about the strike anyway. And he describes how they're at the 450 foot level of the mine, which paid a consistent 1.5 to 2 ounces per tonne. The key was gold per tonne, and if you could about half an ounce, which is about 16 grams, paid well per tonne. If you could get it to an ounce a tonne, you were profitable. If you were at 2 ounces or more, the shareholders are making money. And it wasn't as deep as some of the Australian mines. I mean, no New Zealand mine really went as deep. If you go over to Bendigo in Australia, you can go down, and there's a wonderful tour, I would strongly recommend it, where you can go underground and experience just how vast their gold deposits were. Ballarat was a bit different because it was deep lead in gravels. But go to the Bendigo mine. But the New Zealand Bendigo didn't go as far. But he was climbing. You can see there. This is a diagram that was constructed by James Park in 1906. James Park's an interesting fellow. He was a surveyor and geologist. He had a son who was credited with winning the Sir Keith Park, who was credited with winning the Battle of Britain. He was a senior member of the Royal Air Force, who, everyone. So there's a link there. But 450 foot climb, 450 foot. Can I help you with that? How would you like to start your day before you get paid? Okay, before you get paid, to climb that. That's the ANZ Tower in Albert Street. Or if you go to BHP House in Melbourne, those are the same. That's a 38-storey building. So you start your day by climbing a ladder that tall. You finish your day by climbing back up. And in it he actually says, it takes all your wind to climb this. And at the end of the day, I'm finding myself a little bit older, and some of the others have better puff than me. He continues, there's two bosses at the top and one below. Oh, sorry, two bosses, one at the top and one below, but they're very kind. They say nothing except, your work must be done or you'll soon get the sack. That's a new definition of kind. But quite interesting, they said, arbitrary dismissals. There was no unions at this point. You got to remember, the New Zealand union movement is getting going in the 1880s, when this is written. But it's certainly not getting going amongst miners, or not amongst gold miners anyway. It will develop amongst the coal miners, it will develop amongst the other industries, but it takes a long time to get to gold. When it does, I mean, it gets to Waihi, and there's all kinds of really interesting things with the Waihi strike of 1913. But anyway, if they wanted to get rid of some miners, they would just turn up and say, you don't have a job. And you had one thing you could do, leave. And so there was no tenure, there was no sense of carrying on your employment. And sometimes, even if the water races froze, you simply stopped. And if the mine stopped, your wages stopped. If the stone ran out, your wages ran out. This is an example here where 1881, Mr. Scholar and I went up to Cromwell and turned off 60 miners. In other words, just went up to 60 men. Put that in perspective, if you are in a class at year 9, mostly they're about 30. So you imagine 2 classrooms full of workers and their families living around the mine suddenly are unemployed. With no notice given. It's not kind of like, oh, well, we'll give you 2 weeks' notice. It's like, you stop now. Lawson again, the most part of the men here are Cornishmen, just come from home. They've been working in a coal or lead mine at home, and most are married men. Everyone has a nice little cottage and garden, fowls and goats and cows, and mostly all have flowers. Houses are very cheap here. They are all very kind and nice people, so you can see we're getting the best of fruit and vegetables, very cheap, all growing amongst the rocks. So they had a 75% turnover of staff after that strike. So very few, there was very few who remembered the sort of the good old days, the days in 1869 when they were pulling gold out. They had 15, 16 ounces per tonne. So the Welshmen who had built at Welshtown, that's Welshtown, and so is that. So there were Owen, Jones, Parry, Williams and others. Have been replaced by Cornishmen mostly. So what they would do, how do you handle it when there's a downtime or you've been put off? Well, basically you take your skills, because these were skilled miners. They weren't just people who could swing a hammer. They were skilled. They knew what they were doing. So you'd go and find other work. So there was, if you're a quartz miner, there was quartz mining going on here at Macetown. There was a bit at Arrowtown. Where have I gone there? Macetown, sorry, up here. There was a little bit going on through in Manahira here, but mostly there was developments going on here at the Carrick Range. Known as Carricktown, there was also Bannockburn, there was also Quartzville. So what they would do is, this is about a 14-mile ride by horse, so that's about a day's ride. So what they would do is they would work extra long days, probably 10 and a half or even 11 hours, so they could finish early on a Friday and ride back. There was a bridge just here, ride across here, across, and catch up with their families for the weekend, and then Sunday at about 2 o'clock they would ride back ready to start again on the Monday. I found that was quite a common thing. So Bendigo, they had sort of a sense of this is home. They had a school going, they had a church, they had regular meetings, that sort of thing. In fact, I'm going to tell you a wee bit about that in a minute. But there was one story in 1876 that there was a woman sleeping in her cottage with her 2 children while the husband was away in the Carrick. And there was this drunken young man decided to break into her house and assault her, presumably, and she fled out the window in her nightdress to her neighbour, who also had a husband absent, and the 2 of them basically went back to, I'd love to know which of the houses it was, but their houses were sort of reasonably separate, but they basically both go back, and he's realised the gig's up, and he's hiding from them under a bed. And the newspaper records how they basically persuaded him to come out from under the bed by picking up a receptacle beside the bed and tipping it all over him. You do know what a nightstand is, don't you? You did all your business in there during the night, and then you empty it into the long drop during the day. Got him moving. I always think the newspaper sort of made the comment that that they advised the young man to leave the district before the husband came home. I make a reference here to this is a spectacular map from 1876. where it shows the gardens. Now, the other thing is, if you were a married couple, you imagine going from 7:30 till 5:30 in the morning. You're not going to be doing a lot of gardening. So when they show these big gardens, this adds to the sense of burden for the women, because she was the one growing these. What grows in this sort of area? Well, there was cabbages grew, also turnips, which people ate, not cow fodder, pumpkins, potatoes, very much potatoes, and but they got quite enthusiastic about their gardening. I mean, every time there was some sort of fair on, they always had a vegetable stand and all that sort of thing. So they've talked about the fact, and I think the cottage one, I talked about the fact there were flowers at the front and vegetables at the back. And so he comments that I'm stuck up here in the mountain 18 miles from the nearest chapel or priest. He's a Catholic. I haven't seen one since I've been in England, so God knows I need some prayers. I only wish that you were all out here in New Zealand, for this is a very good country. I should have been here years before. This is... Yeah, I think I showed you that in the Cottages one, didn't I? But anyway. With the letter was an account from O'Donnell's store. Now, O'Donnell's store I've mentioned in another presentation, but this is a better photo to show you what we've got here. The stables. Just here was the first structure, which was corrugated iron. That's the butchery. And here you've got a combination house, general store, hotel, and I've got that round the wrong way. Okay, stables, butchery. Okay, hotel, general store, and bar, and that's the bakery. It's been a while since I looked at that. Anyway, so this was when it started off by Smith and O'Donnell. Smith actually ended up marrying Elizabeth Reed. I showed the photo early on, but this shows an interesting aspect of what he was doing. What he had done was he would exchange. So he owed, I think from memory, about £40. Now bear in mind, they are paid £12 per month. So he's in debt. So how does he work to sort of undo that? He did, on his account, £1.10 is taken off. Do you see how that works? So, story is he's working here, and he was on a dray. They were unloading an ox that had been slaughtered, and basically the chain block gave way, and Lawson fell off and landed head first on the side of the trailer and was instantly killed. But this by labour, that's quite a... I found quite a number of occasions where miners who owed money would come and work some of the debt off. It's a pretty strong thing to do, to work your debt off and end up killed. But what else did they do? Well, one of the things was they had church. They built this tiny building out of corrugated iron and put seats in it and a small raised stage, and that was their church. It was, where was it? Just about there. So amongst Welshtown. And so Reverend Drake would come and preach sermons, but he would also, if he was going to do they had church meetings about once, when there were plenty of people there, once a fortnight, but mostly once a month. And so what he'd do is he'd travel up on the Saturday and he'd give a lecture on the Saturday night of something of general interest, and then on the Sunday he'd run his church service. So this is an example where the life history of Shakespeare, and they charged for these, and I'll tell you, you might sit there going, oh, I don't want to hear a minister talking about Shakespeare. The place was full. There were people came from all over the district to hear that, simply because there wasn't a lot else on. And they were determined to be educated. They were also determined, I suspect, not to be bored. There was athletics, and so this is at... Now, the athletics meetings were always New Year's. So here you've got... it says at Wakefield, so Bendigo, you've got the Bendigo region, you had Wakefield at the bottom, Logantown halfway up, Welshtown up the very top. And then Bendigo Gully sort of further around, so it's still at ground level. And they would have things like here. Now notice, I'm sorry you won't be able to see this in detail, but there were monetary prizes for everything. So for the quoit match at 18 yards, first prize was £1.10. Now if you think about that, these guys were competing for a third of a week's wage playing quoits. There was Cumberland Wrestling, and Cumberland Wrestling, and I'm just trying to think what the other name of wrestling was, but there were also vaulting with the pole. Now that was a bit gnarly because there was no such thing as pads or anything like that. Throwing the hammer, and collar and elbow wrestling, that's the other wrestling. And there were horse races, and these races were hack races. In other words, if you can find a nag and stick a saddle on it, you can compete. And then they would follow up with this breathy sort of, we had a meeting and this happened and that happened, and it was sort of quite a popular thing that people would read to sort of follow up on. It was almost like, following the sports of today. They would actually, this is 1875. It carries on every single year until 1898. And of course, when there's prize money, people come from all over the show. They travel a day from Bannockburn. They come even from Quadrille and places like that. So it became, and of course, the local hotelier, they're happy with it. The local restaurant owners are happy. It's all good. You had to pay money to enter anything, so you paid money. It was kind of like taking a bet, but you paid money to enter. They got sponsorship and so on, and they had dances every Saturday night. Now this is the church. There was a church. There was a school built at Bendigo in 1874, and it was the twin of this one. This is the wooden schoolhouse at Cambrians, and it's absolutely identical. I've got the Bendigo school plans and exactly the same. And they would have quadrille dances. Quadrille is, I don't know, it's some sort of square dance or something, but anyway, they danced all the time, and they would hold this to the music of a pair of violins, and the most famous quadrille dance, quadrille seems to be what everyone did, sort of as if you can't waltz, you can at least join in a quadrille. So it was probably something that you can look at a complete Charlie doing. The most famous quadrille dance was in 1870. They were dedicating the Aurora Company stamper battery. And so what they did was they were up on the ridge because the Stamper Battery's sort of further along here and then down. So nearby they had a catered supper. And I'd already had trouble with the policeman coming along and shutting down celebrations. And instead of saying, oh yeah, you have your celebrations, we're like, no, 10 o'clock you will stop. Well, they were just going, okay, well if we don't have our dance in the pub, he can't kick us out. Because you can't kick someone outside who's already outside. You get me? So, they come up here and they have this quadrille dance, and it's the Cromwell Argist said the floor was not all that could be desired. In fact, a week's blasting operations would have vastly improved it. So they had balls under any pretext. So I love this. So the soiree marked the opening of a hotel, the start of a school year, some special occasion, a new Stamper Battery opening. So the building. So this is the new 76. This is the opening of the home built one. Then quite like this, you've got the Bachelors of Bendigo have a dance, and then the following week, the Spinsters of Bendigo. And it's kind of like matchmaking. I always thought, why don't you just have the two at the same time, and then you won't have any more bachelors and you won't have any more spinsters. This here is an example of one at Goodall's Hotel, which is at Wakefield, and that's one of the stone ruins that are down there in the opposite the bakery there. It's quite hard to sort of sustain this idea of hard men living hard lives when they're constantly turning up to Shakespeare lectures, going to dances, and living with families in comfortable houses. This is William Pengelly, and this is the beautiful house that he lived in. There's a myth that it was a hotel. No, it wasn't. Bottle collector's note. It was not a hotel. And if I catch you, I'll fix you. So, in closing, I'll just mention that the story of Bendigo, now that's part of my chapter in my thesis, so I advise you reading it. But if you're familiar with the old Bendigo of Australia, it was Bendigo, New Zealand was named after it. But there's also other Bendigos. There's a Bendigo in Philadelphia, a state park. There are 4 Bendigos in South Africa. There are 2 in Orkney. And there is a wreck called the Bendigo off North Carolina. I've written about it in my thesis, and there's a few pictures and that sort of thing. But one of the things they used to say, it was quite bizarre, that if you wanted to say this looks like a good goldfield, you wouldn't just say, well, I met Fred, and Fred thought it looked quite good. The story about Bendigo was always, I met Fred, who was an old Bendigo man, and he assured me that it was a good prospect. And so the name Bendigo sort of came to be almost magical. So that's just, hey, you should be reading my book and my thesis and discovering about the Bendigo story. So thanks for listening, and the next one I think we'll look at Māori gold miners. Okay, kei te pai.